If you want to play bebop lines on guitar, then you should know about bebop scales and enclosures. It's how we take something like this and turn it into something like this. Let's start with the dominant bebop scale. It's essentially a variation of the Mixolydian mode of the major scale. Let's say you're playing G Mixolydian. If you add F sharp, the major 7th, then you'll have the G dominant bebop scale, and you're going to play it on G7. For the most part, you're going to hear this sound descending the scale, but you should also be comfortable ascending. And here's what's really important and useful about this scale. If you play the scale in 8th notes, starting on any chord tone of G7, then you're going to play a chord tone on every beat. And if you don't know it yet, playing chord tones on the beat is a great way to outline chord changes. And this even works if you change directions in the middle of a line. Okay, so this is great, but it still doesn't sound like this. What you're hearing is the inclusion of something called an enclosure. It's not specific to bebop scales, but it helps a lot to emphasize chord tones. An enclosure is simply placing notes above and below a target note, like this. And you can do the same thing to the 5th. And to enclose the 3rd, we're going to use this pattern. Okay, so if we put it all together, if we play our G dominant bebop scale with all the enclosures, it sounds like this. With these two concepts, we've created a long phrase that uses a lot of chromaticism, but heavily emphasizes chord tones. Or in other words, it sounds like bebop. Now let's take it one level further. You can obviously use this scale on dominant 7th chords, but you can also use it on 2-5-1s. G7 is the 5 chord in a 2-5-1 in C. So here's what happens if I use the G dominant bebop scale on a 2-5-1 in C. Notice that you end up with several chord tones on strong beats for the 2 chord as well. And as long as you exit the 5 chord gracefully into the 1 chord, you've got a great bebop lick. And while we're at it, it's worth mentioning that you can use this scale on a minor chord even if it's not part of a 2-5-1. Just think of the minor chord as the 2 chord in an imaginary 2-5-1 and play the corresponding bebop scale. Okay, great. So now we've got some great concepts to use to play bebop style lines on the guitar. But how should you be practicing all of this? One of the best things you can do is apply these concepts to tunes that actually get played at jam sessions and gigs. I like to write etudes using whatever concept I'm working on a tune that gives me a lot of opportunities to use that concept. So here's an etude for Miles Davis's Tune Up that uses bebop scales and enclosures throughout. There's a lot more to bebop than bebop scales and enclosures, and I can tell you that Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie and Thelonious Monk weren't thinking about bebop scales when they were improvising. But that doesn't mean this isn't a useful way to organize this information in order to play that kind of language. So if you'd like that etude in tablature or standard notation, as well as a play-along track for tune-up at 2 tempos, as well as all the positions for bebop scales and enclosures all over the neck, then you should head over to Patreon. That's where I post all the extra content that you can't find here on YouTube. So if you choose to support me there, then I think it'll be worth your time. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to learn more about jazz guitar, then you should subscribe to this channel. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.